Rishi Sunak speaking to a crowd out on the campaign just a short time ago. You can see that you could hear that the row was over GPs and the staffing of GPs' surgeries, but he was speaking down there about the D-Day commemorations. He said that the Conservatives have made the country the best in the world to be a veteran, something we've heard from the Veterans Minister today, and he insisted that he had spoken to many veterans over the past couple of days, had expressed his gratitude to them. He said the government had introduced a dedicated Minister for Veterans, an Office for Veteran Affairs and Employment, Health and Housing Support. The government, he said, has also introduced a Veterans ID card. Pressed on why he had decided to leave the commemorations yesterday and not go to that ceremony on Omaha Beach, he said a range of things go into putting these things together, but he acknowledged once again that a mistake had been made. You're looking at aerial pictures just around central London. That's the old telecom tower there, just going past in your screens. We saw, as we were listening to Rishi Sunak, the leader of Plaid Cymru has arrived here at New Broadcasting House, Rheinald Yorwerth. He will be on stage this evening, no doubt talking about all matters in Wales, including the no confidence vote that we had this week in the Welsh First Minister. But we're going to take a little pause for a second from all our representatives who are here in the New Broadcasting House Centre, and we're going to go to Your Voice, Your Vote, a chance to hear from you, the audience, about the aspects of the election that you want unpicked. And in the newsroom for us, our correspondent Kevin Peachey. Hello, Kevin.
Hi, Christian.
So a lot of these questions that I've got here in front of me, it's always the way your iPad just shuts down when you're about to go to something and you've got a whole list of questions. But anyway, it's open again. But all the questions I've got here are questions that won't be asked on the stage tonight because they don't necessarily relate to policy. So let me give you this first one. And it's really just a question about what we're doing. What is Your Voice, Your Vote? What's the project all about?
Yeah, this project, Your Voice, Your Vote, it's very much an open invitation to the viewers, to the voters, who, after all, are the most important people in this election, to get in touch with us, help us at the BBC shape our coverage, and also to explain some things that they may be a little bit unsure about. So we can also help sort of shape some of the questions we put to the leaders and to the representatives of the different parties. So it's very much giving people the opportunity to use their voice, because, as I say, the most important people in this election.
Someone asked from Abergele, Lewis Lloyd asked, is there a place that shows what each party stands for and what they hope to achieve?
Yes, Christian, we're going to be hearing, of course, from the representatives of the seven biggest, the seven large parties in the next, well, nearly an hour's time, isn't it? But also, this only going to cover a certain elements of this election, and so we're going to have to wait for the manifestos, which should be coming out next week, or certainly starting to come out next week. And so Lewis will be able to look through some of those to see where these parties stand, and crucially as well how they're going to go through the costings of those policies. And of course we'll be scrutinising those as well and having a look at those. That allows us to see where the parties stand on different issues. And of course in the news today we've been hearing that Labour have been having their final negotiations on their manifesto, say that's now done and dusted and ready to go.
We've got the debate coming up, of course, Kevin. What are the issues that people are writing in about? What do they want to know?
Yeah, well, thank you, because we have had thousands of people get in touch. There's obviously a whole range of issues that people are really focused on, that are really probably going to shift their votes. Now, this is not a poll, this is not a focus group, it's not a scientific study, but we do get some impressions of some of the things that people are keen to hear about. So the NHS, immigration, climate change, certainly, and issues like that which have come up. But then some slightly different ones as well. So, for example, we had someone get in touch saying accessibility for people with disabilities was a big issue where they are. So there is a whole range of issues that have come up. It's clearly going to be a selection of those. We'll hear a selection of those issues come up tonight. But of course, we want to hear from you about how the issues are going to affect you over and try and shape our coverage over the next 5 weeks or so.
Yeah, indeed so. Do get in touch if you've got a question about what you're seeing tonight or policies you don't fully understand. There is the address to write into, BBC Your Voice at bbc.co.uk. Kevin, thank you very much for that. Joining me at the table, Lisa Nandy from my part of the world, Shadow Secretary of State for International Development. I mustn't get ahead of myself.
You're from Wigan?
Burnley.
Ah, well,
Not that
that'll
far.
do. Yeah.
Welcome.
Thanks very much.
Have you had a busy day?
It's been very busy, yeah. We've been having a big meeting to agree our manifesto for government details to be revealed shortly, and it's been a really positive day for us. We're really confident about the offer that we're putting forward to the country.
Did everybody agree?
We had as you would expect, we had a debate in the room, but it was really positive.
Yeah.
It was an incredibly positive meeting. 5 years ago, I don't think anybody would have expected that from the Labour Party. What you saw in that room today was a group of people who are absolutely determined that this country should start working for working people again, and that's
you'll be
what we're
aware
hoping
of
to
some
deliver.
of the things that Unite have said tonight, Momentum as well, the two-child cap they don't like. There are some things on working directives they don't like. Are you bold enough? Because the word that's been used is cautious.
Well, I'm not going to get into what is or isn't going to be in the manifesto that we publish, but what I would say is this, that I think people generally in that room felt very strongly that there was a real plan to take this country forwards, not just some people in this country, but all the people in it. I think we can be confident about that. I think we can be confident that it rises to meet the big challenges of our times. But as Rachel Reeves, our Shadow Chancellor, has said many, many times, when we make promises, they'll be fully costed, fully funded, and you can bet if we put these in the manifesto that they will absolutely be delivered. We know that trust in politics is at an all-time low after 14 years of Tory broken promises, and so we're not going to make promises that we can't keep, but the promises that we are making, I'm really confident, are going to deliver real change for people in this country.
We're not going to talk about the figure that's been bandied around all week, because we give it more oxygen if we do, and it has been disputed, and by civil servants. But the IFS said you're not being truthful with the public either, because you're making pledges and you're not telling people that either there are two options here given the state of the public finances. One, you either cut public services or you raise taxes, because I know you're going to say we've got to grow the economy, but growth doesn't come in a few weeks or in a few months.
Well, look, we're realistic about the scale of the changes that are needed to grow the economy. One of the policies that we've already put forward is about planning reform so that we can get Britain building again and get the economy growing. These things can't be done overnight, but we can start on day one by delivering economic stability that keeps people's mortgages, their rents, their taxes as low as possible. And I would just say, judge us by the consistency of our message over the last 4 years. You haven't seen us put forward commitments when we don't know how we're going to pay for them. You've just challenged me about some of the criticism of what may or may not be in the manifesto, but the truth is that we're not making commitments that we can't afford. And for me, this is personal because I represent a working class constituency. It's their money and people don't have a lot of it after 14 years of Tory government. So we are never going to play fast and loose with people's finances, and we're not going to hit working people who are already struggling with the highest tax burden for 70 years with even higher taxes. It's not going to happen.
You come from a constituency with a sizable Muslim vote. They're very unhappy about the situation in Gaza. Jonathan Reynolds, I think, said tonight, or Jonathan Ashworth actually, said tonight that there will be a commitment in there to recognise Palestinian statehood before the peace process is finalised. Why have you taken that decision?
We've had a long-standing policy to recognise Palestine as part of a peace process towards a two-state solution. That is really significant because many times when people talk about recognising Palestine, they talk about it as if it's the outcome of a peace process. We believe that it's an essential contribution to a peace process. You can't have a negotiation between two sides if you don't recognise that one of them exists.
I understand that, but we know what Keir Starmer inherited and some of the anti-Semitism that was there in the party, and you will also be aware of the response there was from Israel to the announcement, similar announcement in Ireland, Norway and Spain just the other week. If you were in government, what sort of relations are you going to have with the Israeli government on the back of an announcement like this?
Well, look, of course, we're going to have our disagreements with other democratically elected governments. We've been critical, for example, of the Netanyahu government over the decision to press ahead with the offensive in Rafah. We've called for an immediate ceasefire. They clearly don't agree, but that is our considered view. It is our firm belief. And as the people who are hoping to be the democratically elected government of the United Kingdom, it's our view that we have to speak up for the interests of people here in the UK and across the world. This is having a major destabilising effect on the entire region in the Middle East, and many Palestinian lives are at stake, many of them women and children. And so we have the right to speak up, and we will always use our voice when we can.
And would a Labour government respect the decisions of the ICC?
We would. We recognise the jurisdiction of the ICC.
So you would arrest the Israeli Prime Minister if he came to Britain?
Well, look, I don't think it's going to come to that. I think actually, more importantly, by upholding the rule of law and being absolutely crystal clear that actions have consequences, we make it more likely rather than less likely that a ceasefire is agreed and we get a meaningful peace process back up and running. And that's in the interests of Israeli citizens as well as Palestinians.
I want to talk to you about the policy you set out today because it's so important to young people, and we must engage young people in politics because there's a lot of apathy out there, and it relates to the freedom to buy, the mortgage guarantee scheme.
Yeah.
It will help I'm just saying that, I'm being told Nigel Farage is here, so we'll just have a look at those pictures. The newly minted leader of Reform UK, who will be on stage tonight, one of the 7. He is being heckled, I'm being told, at the entrance to New Broadcasting House, but there he is. Waving to the cameras that are there. Sorry, I was just saying, as we watch those pictures, it will help 80,000 young people. In 2021, 6.6 million were living with their parents. How are you going to help them?
Well, we're going to get Britain building again and continue schemes like the scheme that will help people who don't have huge amounts of money for a deposit to get onto the housing ladder. We're also going to bring forward, as a matter of priority, a renters reform charter, which we'll put into law, that will help many of those young people being protected from unfair practices in the private rented sector. That will help to create the stability that they need in order to save for a deposit and to be able to fulfil the dream of home ownership. This isn't the full extent of our housing policies. We've announced many more, and there are others yet to be revealed in the manifesto. But make no mistake, this is not the moment to be pulling out the rug from under a generation of first-time buyers. This is the moment to be helping
because
them.
you've voted against some of the planning rules in the Commons.
Well, we've been absolutely consistent, actually, on planning, that we believe that this needs reform, because at the moment communities are brought in at the end of the process when there's very little to discuss, which often makes it a very antagonistic process. We want to bring in communities early, and then we want to make sure that we crack on and get that housing built. It's got to be the right sort of housing for communities. We want to see more affordable homes, more social homes for rent built in this country, and we've got a plan to do that. But what we won't put up with is the endless delays in the planning system, while millions of people languish on social housing waiting lists, and an entire generation has seen their dreams of home ownership
housing programme.
We're very committed to a social and affordable housing programme. And when we say affordable, we mean genuinely affordable, not something that's out of reach of the majority of people. We'll be announcing more details in our manifesto, but I'm afraid you're going to have to wait and see what they are.
That's why you were at a secret venue today. I know. Everyone's been trying to track you around London. I know what it's like. Do you like nights like this in the spin room?
Do you know, actually,
How come you got the short straw?
I was just chatting to Angela Rayner on the way here, actually, and I think we are relishing the opportunity to put our case to the country. We've done a lot of work over the last 4 years to put Labour back in the service of working people, and we're confident that we're right about what this country needs, but we know we've got to go out and make the case and win the argument, and we're going to go out and fight for every single vote in this election, because there's so much at stake for the country.
Lisa Nandy, good to talk to you. Thank you for coming along. Lisa Nandy will be here in the spin room. We'll maybe talk to you a little later when we've heard the debate. We have a full complement. No one's given back word. All 7 parties are represented on stage tonight, still with about 50 minutes still to go. So preparations being made. They'll be introduced to the studio, which is not very far away from me, about 100 yards from where I'm standing, and they'll be introduced no doubt to the moderator, who is Mashal Hussain tonight. Spare a thought for her, trying to get all 7 fully represented within 90 minutes. Leila Nathu is with me. It's been really interesting, actually, just in a sort of more colloquial way, just getting some idea of people's policies and manifestos. You still get a sense that ideas are developing within each party.
Yeah, and I think each party is coming here with something to say, something they want to get out. Obviously, they're going to be surprised by questions. They know the kind of broad themes that are going to come up, but everyone is coming here with an idea of what they want, the message they want to put out. And it's, if you think about the last debate we had between Keir Starmer and Rishi Sunak, it was obvious, wasn't it, that Rishi Sunak wanted to hammer home that message about Labour's spending plan. So I think that's something to watch out for, what the parties return to, even if they're quizzed about something else. What is the key themes that each party is trying to push? What are the kind of key messages? Because they know they're going to have limited time, so they know that they need to get things out over and over again, even if it's a slight diversion from the question that they're going to be asked.
Okay, we're going to fix your mic because there's a problem with your mic. While we do that, let's just go outside and speak to Nikki Schiller, who is like the man on the pitch, or at the entrance to the tunnel. He's been welcoming all the leaders who've come, and we have a full team, Nikki.
Yep, everyone is in. The last one in was Nigel Farage, and I have to say, you can always tell how the snappers that are down at the end when someone's coming, and the most snaps were for Nigel Farage. I have to also say, quite a lot of snaps for someone who isn't taking part in the debate when she came in, which was Laura Kuenssberg, who snipped in between a few of the politicians that arrived. But yes, we have a full complement. All of the politicians have arrived, all 7 of them. They'll be heading into the Radio Theatre, which is where the debate is being staged tonight. The production team finalising the questions that will be asked as well. Now, the questions themselves are coming both from members of the audience. There's going to be about 120 members of the audience, and also questions that have been sent in by members of the public. Now, we think, because it's a 90-minute debate, there'll probably be time for about 6 or 7 questions. Now, members of the audience did put their questions in advance, but they were, when they arrived to take part in tonight's debate, allowed to change their questions, so they can react to the day's news events. And of course, we've been talking a lot about Rishi Sunak and that apology over the D-Day commemoration, so it might be that a member of the audience has decided to put that in as a question, and that they may be questioned about it. Of course, the 7 politicians do not know what they are going to be asked at all, and Mashal Hussain, as you said, will be holding the debate together. It'll be interesting to see how it compares to the debate that we had on Tuesday between the 2 men who won, which will be Prime Minister Rishi Sunak and Sir Keir Starmer. There was a lot of shouting, shall we say, or voices raised. Will that happen this time when there are 7 of them on stage? It's quite interesting how also, as they were arriving, some of them very relaxed, not in ties, and also interestingly, when Nigel Farage arrived, the security around here was definitely raised, and also he brought his own photographer with him, and he paused before going in to have some photos taken by one of the Reform Party photographers who was with Nigel Farage. So they're all inside now, probably having a drink and maybe getting some makeup on, Christian, ready to take part in that debate, which, as we know, will start at 7:30, lasting 90 minutes. And of course, you and the rest of your people with you will be dissecting it after, because I'm sure there will be a lot to talk about after those questions have been answered during the debate.
Indeed there will. Nikki, thank you very much indeed for that. Leila Nathu is with me. One thing we've not talked about, Rishi Sunak in Wiltshire just a few minutes ago, heckled a lot. Actually, some of the debate and the to and fro was over GP staffing in GP surgeries, but he also was heckled about the D-Day issue, and again another apology, another fulsome apology for leaving yesterday. What did you make of it?
I think really difficult for politicians on the campaign trail, because they're obviously trying to get out and about as much as possible, get to as many visits, scenarios, groups of people as possible. But the danger with that is that they run the risk of this happening. I mean, this woman who heckled Rishi Sunak about the NHS, it seems that she was a Conservative member, but not afraid to make her views heard on the NHS. So if that is what he's getting from, a Conservative member, think about the dangers of what he could get from somebody who's just a normal kind of floating voter, for example. So I think that is a real, if you think about the calculations of those running the campaigns, do they put the leaders up in scenarios whether they could readily be sort of questioned or heckled by members of the public? If they don't, then they run the risk of their campaign looking very stage managed and the accusations that it's all a bit closed doors and protected. So I think it's a real balance. Rishi Sunak will obviously be a bit more mindful now, given what's happened to him today, about, interacting with people in the public. But, Keir Starmer, when I was out with him last week, there was a very, very small, but there was a little protest in South Wales when I was with him last week, a group of people talking about Gaza. These are things that happen when politicians go out to meet the public, and it should be that way. This is where politicians are trying to have contact with voters. It's the point of maximum access, isn't it, when politicians are out and about? But I think it is a risky thing, and you get a sense of momentum building where people feel like, okay, they've got a carte blanche to do it.
Lisa Nandy was pretty bullish about their offer on Palestinian statehood, and also what had been negotiated today within the National Executive Committee. We've heard that the unions pushed back on some of the policies, were irritated that they didn't go far enough. She thinks it's a bold offer.
I mean, bold is an interesting choice of words, I think. I mean, all the discussion about the Labour manifesto and what we can expect from it is it's going to be pretty muted in terms of, have we heard everything before? Yes, pretty much. Social care, I think, will be quite an interesting policy. It's not something that we've heard a kind of big bang from on Labour. That will obviously be one to watch, just, off the top of my head.
It's really interesting, that, actually, because when you think back to Boris Johnson and the pledge on the steps of Downing Street that he would sort social care, and no one's really got their arms around it. I mean, yes, Liberal Democrats and Ed Davey, we've had Lord Fox here saying we're going to tackle social care, but not to the extent of, stopping the problems that we have in the hospitals,
Absolutely.
Emptying the bed blockers, getting people proper care out in the community. Nothing like that.
Absolutely, and I think everyone will be mindful of what happened to Theresa May during the 2017 election campaign when she did announce a policy on how to fix social care, the funding of it, and it was quickly branded a dementia tax, and her manifesto unravelled from there. So it's a certain kind of point of maximum danger. I anticipate Labour would have wanted to say something sort of to indicate a direction of travel on this before the election was called. It seems like quite a big policy area to have had silence on. We've had a lot from Wes Streeting, the Shadow Health Secretary, the man who wants to be Health Secretary, about his plans for the NHS. We've heard him talk about the idea of a cross-party consensus on social care. That's something that has been tried before and hasn't really resulted in anything. But I think they probably would have liked to have been in a position where they had said something a bit more substantial so that it wasn't a complete surprise. Because I think if you have a kind of policy vacuum that hasn't been addressed before, that is obviously where attention will focus. But, the manifesto process, there wasn't a kind of formal vote on this today in this meeting, this very secretive Clause 5 meeting that happened to sign off the Labour manifesto. There was no sort of vote. And, you're obviously hearing the different elements of the Labour Party kind of pull away on certain issues. Unite, obviously bringing up this issue of workers' rights that we know has been a sort of flashpoint for them for quite a while now. But I guess the question would be, well, what are they going to do about it? Yeah. They are one of Labour's biggest donors. Are they going to reduce their funding? Are they going to pull funding? Labour obviously has other fingers in other pies when it comes to money. So what are the consequences of this discontent?
We should just talk about Wales tonight, because we have the leader of Plaid on the stage, Rhonda Iorwerth, and it's been such a significant week in Wales. Vaughan Gething, the First Minister of Wales, losing a vote of confidence, two of his own side staying away from the vote. It wasn't binding, so he's not obliged to go. But how does Keir Starmer go out on the road into some really important constituencies in Wales with a man who is so politically damaged alongside him?
Yeah, I mean, it's, although he is hanging on to his position, Vaughan Gething, because as you say, it wasn't binding, his authority has clearly been massively diminished by that vote. And you could see, when it was announced, he was very emotional when it came to it. Keir Starmer has given him his backing all along. I mean, the Labour Party as a whole has maintained that it was a very political manoeuvre to try and bring this vote of no confidence. But Labour are looking to make big inroads in Wales. There's been a significant redrawing of the boundaries of constituencies in Wales, so 32 constituencies now, down from 40 odd. So it's a different electoral landscape, and Labour will be looking to kind of make significant gains there. So they're certainly vulnerable. And of course, if you think about the kind of attacks that you hear from the Tories, they point to Labour's record in Wales time and time again as a place where Labour has been in power, talking about NHS waiting lists, for example, which are high in Wales. This is a vulnerable point for Wales. So yes, I mean, it's not ideal, put it that way, for Keir Starmer to have this situation with Vaughan Gething. The hope is that he can sort of ride it out. And certainly the message you're hearing from Labour when it comes to Wales, they launched their campaign in Wales saying, look, this is the prize, having a Labour government in Westminster, a Labour government in Wales, working together to have a sort of more harmonious relationship, saying that this is what they want, and look at all the kind of, it can be greater than the sum of its parts. So, in their eyes, it is a huge prize, but I think a bit of jeopardy now introduced for the Labour Party, given the position of Vaughan Gething, and actually still questions unanswered when it comes to those donations.
We'll talk to a representative from Plaid in a short time. Just in terms of the style of the debate tonight, it's the only format like this, apart from the ITV debate, which comes, I think, on Thursday, on the 13th. So they get two shots at it. How precious is a moment like this for the smaller parties, for the Greens, for Plaid, for even in Scotland maybe for the Liberal Democrats?
Yeah, I mean, I was thinking, cast your mind back to the 2010 election, and Nick Clegg's rise to prominence was basically almost entirely off the back of the televised debates, where he was really catapulted by what he said in there. So it is a massive moment, because in all the kind of noise of politics, the smallest parties do get squeezed out. I mean, to be honest, I think for a lot of people, it might well be the first time they're hearing in detail from even Penny Mordaunt or Angela Rayner. I mean, there are obviously different levels in terms of people's engagement with politics, but I think for the smaller parties, perhaps there is more pressure on them to make sure that their message is heard. They've perhaps got a smaller sort of target area to try and improve their standing. So it is a really crucial platform. I mean, certainly Nigel Farage, newly admitted to this debate since becoming leader only earlier this week. That is certainly a platform
just on
that he is representing.
Just on this issue, and I think it was a point that Krishnan Gurumurthy made earlier in the week. When we say he became the leader of Reform UK, Krishnan was making the point that it's actually like a company, and he is the boss, and so it's not as if there's a democratic process going on within the party that says, hey, we'll choose Nigel to be the leader. He's decided. For what reason? And I was just sort of venturing a thought last night. You had a verdict in New York, damaging polls out over the weekend for Donald Trump. There was all sorts of speculation that he was going to take on a role maybe within a Trump administration. Did he look at both sides, perhaps the difficulties the Conservatives are in, and think, actually, my better option is back in UK politics?
Well, I think really interesting, because if you, a day is a long time in politics, but if you cast your mind back to last week, Nigel Farage was, around the campaign trail, was asked pretty outright about his intentions to stand again to be an MP. And he said, you know what, there's actually a more important election going on, the American election. He very much gave the impression that he could have more influence, perhaps. He said that he was kind of close to the Trump camp, of course. Saying that he felt that he could have more impact, more influence perhaps, on a more important election in his eyes. And then here we are. He's now had a complete change of heart, which he sort of, declared quite up front. I mean, I think in terms of why he's chosen to become leader, I mean, this debate is almost an example of one of the benefits of becoming the leader of a party, is that you are suddenly invited into a slightly different circle where he gets to make the case for his party. He obviously sees himself as a very successful campaigner, given his past role in the Brexit campaign, thinking that he can sort of raise his profile much more if he's actually at the helm of reform. Rather than being the honorary president as he was. So, the trappings, if you like, of leadership are greater, I think, and therefore that perhaps goes some way in explaining his calculation.
Shall we go to your colleague, our political editor, Chris Mason, who somehow is able to speak to us from a train on his way here? Are you drinking his coffee? Can you hear me, political editor Chris Mason?
I can, yeah. Hello, good evening.
Very good evening. Can I read you some BBC copy? This is from Kathy Long. The BBC asked the Prime Minister's office on Wednesday evening to confirm whether or not Prime Minister Sunak would be attending the international ceremony on Thursday, the 6th of June. His office responded the same evening, confirming that the Defence Secretary, Grant Shapps, would be deputising for the Prime Minister at the event at Omaha Beach. Was that the answer we got earlier in the day, Chris?
it's so interesting, isn't it, Christine, unpicking the anatomy of a cock-up, bluntly. Let's put it as it is, because the Prime Minister acknowledges that he made a mistake in not attending that international event at the end of the D-Day commemoration. Prime Minister's office insists go to that final event, attended by plenty of other world leaders, and that had been decided some weeks ago before the general election campaign was underway. Intriguingly, though, even if it was decided back then, firstly, they had decided back then they weren't going to attend that final event, with all of the questions around the Prime Minister's judgment that would have been asked.
We've lost Chris Mason,
isn't it? That
well, I did think it was going to be bold.
The decision making.
I did think it was going to be bold speaking to Chris Mason. I can never get a phone call off a train, never mind broadcast from a train. But maybe we'll try and make some connection with him. Just pick up that, if you would. I know you couldn't hear what Chris was saying, but that idea that he actually wasn't going to go at all to Normandy. I mean, he said categorically to Sky News this morning that was never the case, and yet now we understand that in fact he was thinking of not going.
Well, his line has always been that the itinerary was planned many months in advance. Now, when that exactly was, we don't know. How much notice did Rishi Sunak have in his own mind that he was going to call an election when he did? It had obviously been on the cards. There was talk very much earlier in the year whether he would time the election with the May local election. So obviously it's been in his mind. This kind of event would have been planned with so much notice. And I think, there are starting to be some inconsistencies in the story and various camps saying different things. He wants to make the point that he intended to attend the part of it that he did in the event. It's obviously Lord Cameron, who ended up being the substitute, whether he was a last-minute swap-in or not.
For me, that was the most awkward point yesterday. I was watching it, and at the time, I have to say, because I was editing, I hadn't really put two and two together, but there was this moment where they were standing at Omaha Beach, Chancellor Schultz, Emmanuel Macron, Joe Biden, and the former Prime Minister, but he's not the Prime Minister anymore, sort of standing off at a tangent, and they almost sort of gathered round to block him out.
They did slightly exclude him. I know, I noticed that as well in that shot. I mean, again, when David Cameron came back into cabinet, do you remember what a surprise it was when he walked up Downing Street during that reshuffle? And it was so bold, and actually there was a lot of discussion then about how would it actually work having a former Prime Minister in the cabinet? Very statesmanlike, doing that kind of world diplomacy role required of a foreign secretary. Was there a bit of enjoyment?
There was a moment there where Joe Biden clearly felt embarrassed about it and sort of reached across. I mean, what a day for that to happen when, the UK should have been front and centre.
And we heard from David Cameron earlier today as well, who did sort of defend Rishi Sunak's decision to apologise, talking about, he might have other things to have done. But you do wonder what David Cameron, Lord Cameron, made of that decision and himself. He obviously has had experience.
To tell you that that's a problem, though, or should you have a political antenna good enough to spot that maybe it's not a good idea at this moment in history for me to go back for an ITV interview?
I guess a charitable interpretation of it would be, look, these plans are well laid, months and months in advance. Itineraries are getting bashed out, very quickly. The Prime Minister's got a busy schedule. Yes, let's do that, but not that. Let's come back. Fine. No one really bats an eyelid. Move on to the next thing. The ITV debate, the ITV interview comes up as a prospect. Okay, we've got half a day in the calendar. Let's slot it in there. Bam. You could see how a sort of series of events ended up being that. I mean,
where the fog of the calendar
exactly.
Sort of gets in the way. So, shall we bring in Chris? Because I think he's on the phone. Maybe you could chip in on this, Chris. There'll be some people who say it speaks to the character of the Prime Minister. There'll be others who say his political antenna is just off, completely off, and he got it wrong.
Yeah, hello again. I'm trying on the phone this time, Christian. Fingers crossed this will work. So, look, this is where, to a degree, stagecraft and statecraft are worth unpicking. So there he is as the head of government appearing at this international event, the itinerary for which was signed off several weeks back. One Conservative source suggested to me that what happens at events like this is the Prime Minister's schedule and the head of state, the King's schedule, tend to mirror. And the King was not at that event either that the Prime Minister missed. But it's not a hard and fast. Prime Minister and his team have edge in choose what he decides. That they messed up that they cocked up, that they wished that he had stayed. I think probably what happened here, they are on top of the statecraft of an international event with the politics of an election campaign and an incredibly busy diary. Nobody quite clocked quickly enough on the Conservative campaign that him leaving early would look dreadful. And as soon as they realised it looked dreadful, they apologised. Now, the consequence of apologising was to put rocket boosters under this news story. But from the Prime Minister's perspective, he will hope at least some people will conclude, OK, he fouled up, he apologised. He's somebody who's willing to apologise when he makes a mistake. But the mistake is a big one, and it's the kind of one that people may well notice amid the din, the noise of an election campaign, where much of that noise might, wash over people. That's why politically it is so potentially devastating for the Prime Minister. And let me tell you, plenty of Conservatives are furious because they just think this is something that will be noticed.
Chris, thank you very much for that. We'll hopefully talk to you in person when you get here. The debate around half an hour away, but David Davis, the former Conservative Secretary for exiting the European Union, is with me. Hello.
Pleasure to be here.
Army veteran, formerly in Air Squadron. Was that right? Did I get that right? In your day?
You can leave them guessing, that's all right.
Yeah, well, you are. I know you've had service in your time, so I'm bound to ask you what you made of the Prime Minister's decision to leave Omaha Beach yesterday.
It was a mistake. There's no two ways about that. He realised it was a mistake pretty quickly, and he apologised pretty quickly. And fair enough, mistakes happen in election campaigns. We're all under time pressure. Even I'm under time pressure. I'm not the Prime Minister, going from one interview to another, one incident to another. I mean, I actually was there for the 65th. This is the 80th. I was there for the 65th when the men were 85, 90, and so on. I thought many of them would be dead soon, so we'd better go and see them, pay our respects. When I went there, initially, Gordon Brown wasn't even going to go at all.
Well, that's what we've just heard here.
Yeah.
We've just had some copy tonight from Millbank that, in fact, they asked ahead of Thursday's commemoration whether he was going to go, and they were told that Grant Shapps was going to go. Grant Shapps, the Defence Secretary, was going to go in his place. So clearly, there was a decision pending that the Prime Minister wouldn't go at all.
No, but my point, when he decided to go. Now, my point here with Gordon Brown was he decided not to go until Obama was going. So he went to rub shoulders with Obama, not actually to pay respects. And I saw it. I was there. I watched the behaviour going on. That was an explicit decision. Here, it was a mistake. Fair enough, he made a mistake. I wish he hadn't, but he's apologised for it, and that's it, And I spent a lot of my time. I spent 20 years going to memorial service as a trustee of my regimental association, going to memorial service, going to these sorts of events as well. I take it very seriously. These people made sacrifices, or their comrades made sacrifices, which have given us the freedom for you and I to talk freely today. That's what it's about.
How can you say to 18-year-olds around the country, we want you to give up a year of your life for public service when the Prime Minister can't even spend an afternoon on Normandy beaches paying respects to the veterans?
Understand. He spent the morning with the veterans. That was the point he was doing. He was doing all the British events. The latter part was with Biden and Macron and so on. That wasn't with the veterans. So he made, and I wish he had been there because it would have been a whole day and so on. But nevertheless, his first aim to see the veterans was what he did. Actually, the opposite of what Gordon Brown did at the 65th.
I was making the point earlier. I was trying to think of a political comparative. The only one I could think of was Scott Morrison, the former Australian Prime Minister, going on holiday to Hawaii while people were struggling with the bushfires. It feels of that magnitude.
No, it isn't. That was an explicit decision. That was a slow motion decision. This was a diary mistake. I mean, whoever booked it wrong, and he didn't catch it. That was the mistake. He didn't catch it. And, I'm sorry for that. I apologise. Myself, I apologise for that.
But you were apologising for the leader. There are a lot of constituent candidates out there who question, first of all, the decision to go so early, have questioned the way that policy has been outlined and briefed to the press, and now are making apologies for the leader. He's your biggest liability at the moment.
No, not at all. Look, he's a decent man. He's a hard-working man. He's a clever man. He's a patriot. Unlike he's giving up income to do this job in a way that most aren't. You know, he's very good as a Prime Minister, but he's made a mistake here.
Well, how good are his comms team around him? If you'd have been with him yesterday, what would you have said to him?
I'd have said stay, but then
So who's around him? This is one of the problems. The Conservative Party MPs we've had here before have said the people around him don't understand the game, and they are making the mistakes, and they're not guiding him properly.
This is an election campaign. It's not about the staff. It's about the future. It's about what people want for their future, for their families, for their parents, for their children, for themselves. That's what it's about. They won't be doing sort of super technical analyses of whether or not they manage this or that properly. That's a sort of Blairite attitude to politics, which I don't accept. My constituents on the doorstep, they understand this. I've talked to a couple of them about it today, this very day, and they understand this, and they accept that he's made a mistake. They agree he made a mistake, but they accept he's also apologised for it, and they also accept that he's trying to do the best for the country he can, and that's the most important thing about all of this.
But there's an issue of trust here. We now learn that he maybe wasn't going to go at all. In Wiltshire, just a few minutes ago, he's talking about the £2,000 tax rise for every household over 4 years that he said Labour will bring about. We know already, and we've talked about it all week, that those numbers that are behind that figure were supplied by the government to civil servants who are not independent civil servants. They work to the government of the day. So it's a lie.
No, he said it was some of it was calculated by the Treasury. There's two components of this. There are those that the Labour Party have costed themselves, right? And where that's available, that's what the government, that's what he's taken. Where they were costed, so almost certainly an underestimate, but they've accepted that. And where the Treasury civil servants costed the policies put to them, Labour policies put to them, they've taken the lowest of the estimates. They always give you a range of estimates. Minister, this will cost between 1 billion and 1.4 billion. And they've taken the lowest of the estimates. The key point here is this is the least that the Labour Party will be imposing on ordinary working people. Yesterday, The Guardian, for some reason hasn't come up, The Guardian said there are 12 tax increases planned for September in a supposedly emergency budget can come up. We haven't heard a word of that. If the Labour Party will admit what it's intending to do and how it's going to fund it...
Are you admitting? Because The Spectator, which, let's face it, is right-leaning, says actually under a Conservative government it would cost us £3,000 over 4 years.
No, I don't agree with that. I mean, one of the questions I've just been asked in another interview is, you are saying these areas of expenditure are not protected, and there's a reason for that. We have to control it. The Conservative Party believes in getting value for money. We haven't got a long enough interview to do it, but I could walk you through what Gordon Brown did when he came in, and the reason that's relevant is because Rachel Reeves has said she's going to copy him, and it cost us £5 for every pound of investment, and that sort of waste we can't afford. So that real arguments to be had, but Labour have got to fess up to what they're actually going to do.
David Davies, good to have you here. Thank you very much. David Davies there, former Secretary of State for exiting the European Union. I'm just going to give you a quick whirl around the spin room, which you can see is filling up nicely with just over 21 minutes to the debate. We've got 90 minutes of debate starting from 7:30 this evening. If you are just joining us, 7 parties on stage. Let me go through. Can we put the slate on screen of who is going to be taking part in this debate tonight? So we've got Penny Mordaunt, Conservative Leader of the House, Labour's Deputy Leader Angela Rayner. We've got the Deputy Leader of the Liberal Democrats, Daisy Cooper, Stephen Flynn, SNP Leader in the Commons, Rheinab Iorwerth, the Leader of Plaid Cymru, Carla Denyer, co-leader of the Greens in England and Wales, and of course Nigel Farage, the newly installed leader of Reform UK. So that's the view you're looking at there of the journalists who will be giving reaction to what we hear over the next couple of hours. We'll maybe speak to some of those journalists very shortly, but here at the table with me we've got Zach Polansky, who is the Deputy Leader of the Green Party. Hello to you.
Thanks for having me.
And also here we've got Hedith Volkan from Plaid Cymru. Did I pronounce that correctly?
Yes, you did.
Phew. Okay, good. Let's start with what we're going to hear from Plaid tonight. It's going to be quite a difficult election for you because there are a lot of boundary changes in Wales. How concerned are you about that?
Well,
we're concerned that there's a reduction from 40 to 32 MPs in Wales, meaning that there's less politicians to represent our communities, larger constituencies. So it is a huge concern for many people in Wales that their voices just won't be heard. And that's why we're going to hear from Rhina Piorwedd tonight about our vision for Wales and why it's important that we do have Plaid Cymru MPs there standing up for our communities, fairness and ambition for our communities, and showing that it's not a binary choice between Labour and the Tories. You know, both those parties wanted to be seen as a binary choice. That was exacerbated by the ITV debate the other night.
The slogan is no more ignoring Wales at Westminster. Is it a campaign for independence?
Well, we are ignored by Westminster. That's evidence from the fact that we don't receive fair funding. You know, we're owed £4 billion from HS2 consequential. There won't be a track of railway built in Wales, and yet we're paying for things. Things like the Crown Estates need to be devolved. So we want fairness for our communities, and that's not there at the moment. And we're certainly, you know, as Plaid Cymru MPs, they fight for Wales at every opportunity, but also influence and show that people will see tonight that there is a choice in Wales, and Plaid Cymru is that choice, a progressive voice.
You're going to take the Crown Estate off the King, you're going to put it into a sovereign wealth fund. Why would that be any different to what happens at the moment? Because all that money that comes from the Crown Estate in Wales is funneled through the Treasury and redispersed to communities around the country. Why would you need to put it in a sovereign wealth fund?
Well, Wales is energy rich, but our communities are poor. Child poverty rates extremely high and just growing. And we should be able to benefit, make energy cheaper for our communities, because as £853 million goes back to the Treasury from Wales, 12% of that goes to the King. Well, actually, Scotland has full control of the Crown Estate since 2016, and they're able to spend it in the way that they choose. We'd like to be able to spend it so that we can support community energy projects, that we can reduce energy costs for people who are really struggling at the moment in terms of being able to heat their homes. So why would we give the money back when our communities desperately need it and we know that they would benefit?
Exactly. Since we're talking about energy, it is one of the glaring things of the campaign that we're talking very little about climate change, when the UN would say it's the biggest existential threat.
It's so important, but look at this election, it's really clear the Conservatives are toast. 14 years of underinvestment in public services, and they've completely ignored the climate crisis. Then you have the Labour Party.
Have they ignored it? They've set net zero targets.
I mean, our climate is getting worse, and they are not taking it with the severity it needs. But then we have the Labour Party, who came up with this £28 billion figure. That was not even nearly enough to do the most basic measures. And now they've rowed back from that. If I can give you an example, if we insulate every single home in Britain that needs it, that would be a triple win. It would reduce people's bills, vital in a cost of living crisis. It is good for the climate, the exact question you asked me, and it creates good green jobs that can be in trade unions, that can be organised, that can be paid properly. There's a really clear vision here for the Green Party for real hope and real change, which is around the climate crisis, yes, but it's also about defending the NHS, cleaning up our rivers and seas, making sure we're building council housing, providing homes for people, protecting renters. All of these things are ready for the taking. Labour aren't going to do those things. They're missing in opposition at every moment, and people are ready to vote Green. And I'm really proud that I found out just an hour ago, for the first time ever, we're going to be standing in every single seat in England and Wales, bar one. That's, I believe, one seat more than the Conservatives. That means everyone watching this programme, wherever they are, will have the chance to vote Green.
Have you vetted them properly?
Yes, I believe so. Now, I know we've had...
Well, the Times said today that there is a dossier, 20 of your candidates who are standing are circulating anti-Semitic material.
So anti-Semitism needs to be taken with intention and care and needs to be dealt with really seriously, and the Green Party will never tolerate anti-Semitism.
So are those candidates running, or all 20 are they out?
Can I just say, I'm a Jewish politician. I'm one of only 5 people in British leadership history that have run as a leader in British politics. So I take this really seriously, and I actually find it offensive from the Times that this is not being taken with the care it needs to. Now, if people have been anti-Semitic, it is right that they've been suspended and expelled from the party. However, I'm also really proud of our party's position on Gaza. We have called for a ceasefire from the beginning, a release of the hostages, and an end of an arms sales to Israel. From the Times article, some of these people being accused have done things like walked with a Palestinian solidarity march. When we conflate anti-Zionism or criticism of the Israeli government with anti-Semitism, that's dangerous. And as a Jew, that makes me feel less safe. It's really important in British politics we have a sensible conversation about anti-Semitism, Islamophobia and all forms of racism.
Would you support Labour's policy, which is in their manifesto and will be published next week, which would give the Palestinian statehood before a peace process is finalised?
I think it's really important that the Palestinian people have statehood. But I would say from the Labour Party, this has come way too late. We had Keir Starmer going on TV saying that Israel had the right to cut off water and electricity to the Palestinians. Emily Thornberry then doubled down on it a few days later. It's really important that with these conversations we talk about peace building, about this diplomacy and international solidarity. I'm really proud that the Green Party have taken place with that. And it's also really important just to say finally too that we need to challenge power and wealth in this country. So for instance, we want to put £50 billion into the NHS. We think adult social care should also be free. Now to do that we can't just move small pots of money around. We've got to move big pots of money around. So we're implementing a wealth tax. That would be a 1% tax on people with assets over £10 billion or more. Now that would raise about 50 to 70 billion pounds we could put into our public services. I'm not surprised that some of the powerful and wealthy, like the Times article, are coming for the Green Party. I think we'll see this increasingly. We're going to be resolute, say no to anti-Semitism, but stand against power and wealth, trying to make our politics more toxic.
Just a quick word on solidarity. You withdrew your support for the First Minister in Wales, Vaughan Gething. He lost a vote of no confidence in Wales this week. Should he go?
Yes, he should. It didn't have to get to this point. We very clearly have said for a number of weeks now that he should have repaid the penny and apologised, and he couldn't then have got on with the job of delivering for the people of Wales. But unfortunately he hasn't done that, and it was with sadness actually that it came to the matter of having to place a vote of no confidence, only the second time in the history of the Senedd. So the fact that he is ignoring the will of the Senedd is significant, and something that I hope he is reflecting
force
on.
him out, can you?
We can't, but I hope he does reflect on the seriousness of the situation. And to be honest, it's not just the opposition parties who are raising this. There are a number of his Labour colleagues. The fact that Labour members of Parliament, or ones who are standing as candidates now, don't want him in their constituencies, surely, given that he's such a new First Minister as well, he's not having that honeymoon period in any shape or form, and he simply has to go so we can move on with delivering for the people of Wales and all those serious challenges in terms of poverty, trying to fight for fairness, for funding, for ambition, to make sure that they're in a strong position to negotiate with the next UK government for Wales. And rather than that, there's just infighting within Labour. How is that going to deliver for the people of Wales?
We'll have to leave it there. Helen, thank you very much indeed. Good to get the thoughts of two parties that don't get as much airtime on national television, but they will tonight. 90 minutes of this debate, starting in just over 12 minutes' time. Let me just show you around a little bit, because the spin room is starting to fill up. You can see some of the journalists, some of them having their dinner, but most of them leaning over their computers, ready to start typing out tomorrow's front pages in reaction to what we're seeing here in the debate. And the person who's going to be fact-checking it for us, and we'll get plenty of that tonight because there'll be all sorts of facts coming at us, is Nick Eardley. So this is what he's going to be doing.
7 parties tonight, so we'll hear lots of different views. There will be a lot for the team here to fact-check, and the goal is going to be to put some of the claims you hear tonight in context, explain what you can trust and what you should perhaps be a bit more sceptical about. Let me just remind you of some of the stuff we've heard already this week, because there have been controversial claims in the last few days. The Conservatives have doubled down on this one that you heard Rishi Sunak make a lot on Tuesday, that claim that a future Labour government would put up household taxes by £2,000. If you hear that tonight, remember the context, because that figure on its own is misleading. Some of the figures used to put this together are dubious. If you take the figure at face value, it's over 4 years, not 1. And if you hear it claimed that this is a Treasury figure, bear in mind tonight that the top civil servant in the Treasury clarified earlier this week that, well, it isn't. Labour, by the way, have a pretty dubious claim of their own as well. This one, that the Conservatives would scrap national insurance, and that would open up a hole of £46 billion in the public finances. Well, when you hear that, it's worth remembering The Conservatives have said this is a longer term aspiration. It's not a party policy, and the Chancellor has insisted this won't happen anytime soon until the money is available. So if you hear these things tonight, just remember, be sceptical. Some other things worth equipping yourself when you're thinking about the arguments tonight. There's been a lot of talk recently about the cost of living, about whether people are better off now than they were when the Conservatives came to power or since the last general election. Well, this is the picture when it comes to household disposable income. As you can see, since 2010, since the Conservatives took over, it has gone up quite a lot. But it's a really interesting picture since the last general election in 2019. You can see there's a big drop. That's largely because of the pandemic. But the figure now, going into the general election, is lower than it was in 2019. So living standards have gone down since the last general election. That is not supposed to happen. It's not happened since these records started to be collected. So it'll be interesting to hear what the parties say about that tonight and what their solution would be. What else? Well, immigration might come up. The situation with small boats crossing the Channel has been a big debate over the last few months. This is the crucial context that you need. The Conservatives like to talk about this figure, 2023, the fact that small boats crossings came down a third between 22 and 23. The thing is, that's still the second highest on record. And if you have a look down here, if we focus in on this red line, that's what's happened so far this year. So far in 2024, small boats crossings are up, both on 2023 and that record year of 2022. We don't know for sure what's going to come up tonight. It is a big night for the seven parties. We'll all be here tonight with a team of fact checkers and plenty of other people going through the numbers, figuring out what we can and can't trust. But the context there, I think, is going to be really important. There will be a lot of numbers, and figuring out exactly what they mean and how to digest them is extremely important.
Hello, you are watching BBC News. That was Nick Eardley there. I'm Lewis Vaughan-Jones, just giving my colleague Christian Fraser a short break in the spin room. Welcome to the newsroom here in London. We are counting down into the start of the debate. Not long to go now. What is it? 7 minutes or so, where all the talking stops and the debating begins effectively. Let me remind you of the format. Michelle Hussein will be this is the inside of the spin room, just so you know. The journalists there waiting, standing by to file their copy for when the politicians start talking. Now, as I mentioned, the format will be Michelle Hussein, my colleague, will be comparing, asking the questions and attempting to keep order. Who will she be trying to keep under control? Well, 7 people will be debating, representing 7 different parties. For the Conservatives, Penny Mordaunt. For Labour, Angela Rayner. For the Liberal Democrats, it's Daisy Cooper. For the SNP, Scottish National Party, Stephen Flynn. For Reform UK, their new leader, Nigel Farage. For Plaid Cymru, Rhun ap Iorwerth. And for the Green Party, Carla Denyer. So some of those names clearly may not be so familiar to viewers in different parts of the UK. If you're outside Wales, Rhun ap Iorwerth from Plaid Cymru may be a new one. And if you're not in Scotland, Stephen Flynn, SNP leader, potentially, although you may well have seen him at PMQs. And I can tell you now that all those names will be standing by, getting ready, last-minute preparations. And just in the last few minutes before the debate gets underway, let's hand back to my colleague Christian Fraser in the spin room. Hi, Christian.
Yes, hello. Sorry to leave you just for a short while. We've been through the health and safety rigmarole, which you have to do when you have so many people all in one room. So the welcomes have been given to all the journalists who are here. Let me just show you, first of all, but there's lots of television stations here, of course, tonight who are all going to be giving immediate reaction to what they hear. So GB News and Sky are here. There's Lisa Nandy giving her response to one of the channels at the moment. There's a raft of desks normally putting in. This usually is the BBC canteen, so it's been completely re-rigged for all the journalists who are here. Not all of them from the UK. I've seen some foreign journalists here as well tonight. Here's Nick from Newsnight. Newsnight will be here. Are you excited?
Of course we're excited.
Yeah.
A festival of democracy, Christian Fraser. I hope you're excited too.
Yes. Well, I certainly am, and I've already bumped into one or two politicians. I've seen David Davis. We've had an interview with Lisa Nandy.
Have you given them a really hard time? The Christian
Well,
Fraser
David Davis
scrutiny.
he probably got it a bit more than Lisa Nandy, only because, of course, the story today is very much around the Prime Minister Rishi Sunak.
It is indeed, isn't it?
What are you? You're one of the people who always has his ear to the ground as to what the party is saying. What are you hearing about the apology he's given?
Well, because it's a general election, candidates are keen not to undermine the campaign publicly, but it's no great secret that this has not gone down particularly well in the Conservative Party.
There's a dilemma, isn't there? Because you think tonight about Penny Mordaunt, who's on stage. Her instinct would be to not defend him because she's a veteran herself, or she's a reservist. She's an honorary commander in the Naval Forces. She's representing Portsmouth constituency, but at the same time, she has a 15,000 majority. I was going to say only a 15,000 majority, but in the political times we're in, maybe that's not enough. So well, she somehow has to prop him up a bit.
And in a sense, that's why Rishi Sunak had to apologise. Because if he hadn't apologised, it would be impossible to see how Penny Mordaunt could go onto that stage tonight. So he's apologised, which has made her life somewhat easier. But I imagine Penny Mordaunt will not find this easy, A, because of her background in the military. As you say, she's a Portsmouth MP, Navy, and launch of D-Day. She will find it very, very difficult. And don't forget who she's up against, Nigel Farage, and he's been speaking in very strong terms about this today, and you can imagine the political pressure he's going to want to put on Penny Mordaunt.
Yeah, indeed. So I'm just looking over your shoulder. They're already in position. We can see.
Don't want to miss the debate.
No, I will let you go.
We're important, but we're not that important.
You see Michelle Hussain going through her paces there. All the candidates, all 7 candidates lined up in front of her. Aisha Zarika was telling us just a short time ago that when she was advising candidates ahead of debate night, she would always get them here early. She didn't want anybody to be rushed, give them a bit of time to acclimatise to their surroundings. And just as we move through here, you can see that everybody's head down, waiting for things to begin. So when it does start, of course, the speakers will kick in here. Everybody will be following it closely. And then all hell will break loose basically after the debate, because that's the moment when the spin room really does start to play a role. You'll hear from all sorts of MPs contextualising, putting their spin on what they have heard. Here's Aisha and Layla. I was just saying, I mean, this is the sort of lull before the storm, isn't it? Because all hell breaks loose the other side of the debate when everybody tries to put their bent on it.
Yeah, everyone's been friendly now. The headbutting will begin like after
It's polite to tackle over a sandwich.
Yes, exactly.
Before everybody goes to war. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, but it's quite good. I feel like it's quite collegiate. Everyone's kind of, there's a bit of cross-party action going on here. Spinners and journalists, crossing the divide. It's okay.
I'm watching our colleague Michelle Hussain, who's just having the final touches to her makeup, and it's a big night for any broadcaster, particularly in a format like this. I mean, just spare a thought. There's 7 people, 90 minutes. Not easy.
Trying to sort of control everything, and of course every party will be watching really closely, saying, did one party get a bit more time? Was somebody allowed to interrupt a bit more? So she will be thinking really scrupulously about how to be balanced and how to be fair. So she's got a really big job to do tonight.
And also the idea of kind of having game planned it. She will have kind of had her structure, had her preparations, but then also having to be responsive to the kind of turn of events in the course of the debate. So should something materialise, something unexpected, she has to be prepared for all eventualities. I mean, we've just had a health and safety announcement in here for all of us, but there are all those considerations in there as well.
She did a really good job the other day, but one of the directors said to me, you can never win on a night like this because, as you say, trying to space it out correctly, or maybe not giving someone a bit of leeway on a particular answer.
Absolutely, and people get really cross about it, and people feel like their side's lost out. And in terms of the unexpected moment, each one of those candidates, particularly from the smaller parties, they will want to have that unexpected moment, right? Remember the kind of Nick Clegg moment, that breakthrough moment. There'll be somebody there thinking, right, tonight's my breakthrough moment as a smaller party leader. This is my chance to really punch through in terms of the public consciousness. And that's really hard for the moderator as well, because if someone has a game plan to try and disrupt things or be that disruptive force, that's really hard as well.
Because they need it to be memorable. They need their appearances. There's such short amount of time for each party to make an impact. They need it to be memorable.
Okay, well, we'll leave it there. Thank you very much indeed for that. I will take you outside the building, outside New Broadcasting House. We're 10 seconds away from the debate. 7 parties on the stage. Here is your host, Mishal Hussain.
Seven political parties, 7 leading figures who believe they have the answers to the UK's future.